MarTechTalk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of MarTechTalk. I'm your host, Luke, and today we'll be joined by three fantastic panelists. But before I introduce them, let's set the scene for what we're discussing. This week's topic is increasing conversions through smarter use of your customer data platform. So whether you are already using a CDP, you're thinking of investing in one, or you want to change yours, we should cover plenty on the subject this week. To start, we'll be talking about identifying and overcoming challenges with centralizing data in a single location. While that can be easier in many ways, does it mean losing detail for a simpler output? Then we'll look at how a CDP can work best. Specifically, we'll talk about measuring and proving the value of a CDP. So which metrics matter most? Finally, we'll move on to discuss integrating your CDP into your MarTech to maximize your ROI. So let's begin by welcoming our lovely guests this week. In no particular order, can I ask you to turn on your camera and mic when I introduce you, please? First, we have Håkon, Head of MarTech at IT Consulting Hub, Sopra Steria. Hi, Håkon. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And we have Alexandra, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Udemy.
Hello, great to be here.
Hi, Alexandra. Thank you. And we have Pratyush, Head of Marketing at hedge fund specialist Lennon Chalcott. Hi, Pratyush.
Hi, Luke. Nice to meet you. And hi, everyone. Hi, Alexandra.
Thanks all for joining us. So let's start off by diving straight into our news item for this week. We've got an article here which comes from a CDP Institute report. It talks about investment in new tools and software, specifically in the second half of 2022. And it talks about increasing employment in this sector by 11%. But things move on fast, so it'd be great to hear about your experiences. Is software investment still on the up, or are you seeing a different trend right now? Håkon, I know you mentioned having some experience here, so can I come to you first, please?
Absolutely. It's been both a rough year and a harsh year economically and sociopolitically. So, of course, investments have been on extremely high scrutiny, both for result-driven and for hiring. And overall, we see more use of trying to leverage either internal data or internal platforms. So I do see that we are on the path, but I think in some fields we are accelerating more than we are in others.
Okay, thanks. And Alexandra, can I move on to you next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone, at least at all levels of organizational size, whether enterprise or mid-market or even startups, right? So much goes into investing into the tech stacks we've thoughtfully and mindfully acquired, but really coming to the floor and understanding, am I actually optimizing the tech that we have today in a meaningful way around specific use cases? Are we bringing the cross-functional leaders together who own the different tech stacks or the data management tools or the BI systems we're using to ensure we have a holistic approach to one, not only identifying the customer journey across the entire life cycle, so pre and post purchase, and of course, all through the nurture and growth stages we aspire to support our customers through, but really, are we being mindful with our data? Are we really leaning into our first party data? Are we ensuring that we're cleansing and optimizing it or enriching it when we need to really personalize those touch points at scale, and then double down on the signals that we're getting to really engage and optimize that growth. So there's a lot in flight. And I think when we think through macro headwinds that we're all experiencing at a variety of different levels, CDPs are often very expensive. And we need to be mindful about which CDP do we choose, or are there other routes to really ensuring that we're creating sound data management solutions that are operationally efficient and effective across all the different stakeholders in the business that need to lean into that data insights and analytics.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's certainly a more complicated issue than this article will let on.
Naturally.
I mean, you mentioned that the cost of it there, and I'm going to move on to you next, Pratyush. And I know you're from a hedge fund background, so I wonder if the cost part of it is as much of a factor over there, or if it's more about just getting the newest, shiniest toys.
Great question, Luke. Thank you very much, first of all, for introducing the entire team. Just to answer your question in a very simple way, at this moment, things are quite uncertain. Like, we're still trying to sort of explore, ways to optimize budgets, find new ways to sort of like evaluate tools which can sort of get the work done, but, mainly to sort of like offer a seamless customer experience across all touch points, yet not become a major expense. And from my personal observations, I've seen that the companies that I work with, in my capital firm, we see that almost all the companies are currently reevaluating their MarTech stack, particularly CDPs, because again, as Alexander said, it can be very expensive, and not, with this whole global downtrend of economy, and with so many things changing so rapidly, marketing budgets are the first thing that have been affected. So I would say yes, we're not looking at the shiniest toys at this moment, but we're trying to sort of like find tools which can sort of get the job done, and yet offer this customer experience across all touch points.
Okay, thank you. That's clarifying that. And I was going to move straight into our talking points here, but we've had a question from Harvey, so I think we'll briefly address that before we move on. Last week in here, we were talking about cookies, the future of cookies, then going by the wayside and moving from third party to first party and everything involved with that. Harvey's asked, we talked about cookies in here last week. What does the future hold for CDPs specifically in relation to cookies? So I don't know if that's something that you can talk on much, but we'll probably go in the same order. So Håkon, I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
All right. Well, it can go two ways. Like that's the easy answer. What I do see though is that we get more and more like wholly integrated CDPs and a more focus on real-time CDPs. So with that move, I think that the cookieless future is actually going to be a boon for a lot of the ecosystems, because they have their own identity platforms. They have their own connections. They orchestrate their data differently based on what platform you have. And that is one of the things that is kind of pushing the newcomers out, because they don't have that kind of hierarchy to go by. Like, you have the large movers and shakers who has these extremely large rigs that they can rely on to essentially ensure that you don't have to have specifically a cookie identifier to start identifying different touch points, logged in, logged out, etc.
Okay, so new tech to go with it then.
Yes.
And what do you think on this, Alexandra?
Well, I think we're going to see quite a bit of M&A activity, I think both near and long term. One, to Håkon's point earlier, is that some of it's pre-built, some of it's turnkey, but a lot of it is still very manual and laborsome. So as we think about not only dollar consolidation, but people consolidation or reorgs, where organizations are going to have to think through, how do we upskill, reskill, and scale our talent? We're going to see a lot of new folks entering sort of the data management, data security, and privacy threshold, because we all need to be good stewards of customer data, no matter where we sit in the organization, whether I'm a field seller in market using Salesforce day in and day out. That owned data is going to be so much more important. And I remember when this talk initially started, back when I was at IBM Watson, and Google was making these announcements and Apple had its own approaches. And so when we think through that first party data, we can no longer use third party data as a crutch, and we have to pick partners in our ecosystems and their partner networks, and ensuring that we are being mindful stewards of the data that our customers are giving us, whether I'm a retailer and I'm looking not only at the social engagements I'm sending out, but also maybe the return history data points, right? And how do I personalize that journey? But I think Gartner had mentioned in an article not too long ago that they anticipate vendor consolidation in the CDP space to be about 70% coming up. So when we think about when we have these headwinds, right, that are going to force smarter, probably more scalable partnerships or even M&A motions, but also what are the must-have solution integrations that exist within the CDPs that exist today? There's going to be leaders that show up because they've been mindful stewards of owned and first-party data, but also their third-party partners are really truly valuable enrichment partners. But there's also, the walled gardens are going to exist in their own rights. So we really have to ensure that whatever we choose today can not only be scaled across a marketing organization, but truly across all the different pillars of the organization. So we get that long-term elasticity we all hope and strive for.
Nice. So that old catch-22 of planning for something that you can't see before it comes. Brilliant. Can I move on to you, Pratyush, next, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Luke. And just to answer your question in a very simple way, I'd say in this cookieless future, like that we're going to get into very soon, I really don't think it's going to, or should I just to sort of put it rightly, I think that CDPs are going to save the day because until now, third-party cookies are they're like they're looked as something like something that's evil in some ways or the other, but they're not inherently evil. What they've done is they've helped the industry grow by making it easier for systems to interact with different tools. Now with CDP into play and first-party data being the focus, I see that this is going to help a lot of the marketers, a lot of the marketing teams feel more responsible for the way they sort of run their marketing campaigns, and their and the way they sort of not just the marketing campaigns, the way they sort of help the customer have a better customer experience across all touch points, the way they use insights that they're going to be collecting across all these different touch points, all the different systems. So CDP has, I think, a much bigger role today with with so many broken MDMs and so many broken systems which does not have like a seamless or singular customer view, a singular point of view for all the customers and the insights about these customers. I think any company which would not have or any marketer who would not have an access to a CDP would really be in the wrong line of work, I guess, because CDP is going to play a massive, very, very important role in helping us sort of get through this whole cookieless future that we're into. We're going to get into very soon, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Pratyush. All of your answers there, I felt very uplifted, very positive responses. That's nice to hear. Which is, takes us into our first point, which is a bit less positive. Talking about data in a single location, and identifying the challenges with that. But then, to bring it back to positive, overcoming those challenges. So, Håkon, can I start with you?
Of course. The golden carrot of the CDP is, of course, single source of truth, and moving towards having, imagining the future where you can actually control and manage and monitor your data from a single point. You don't have outliers or different parts of your organization who's using a different data set, especially here when we are touched by EU law and GDPR. Missteps here is catastrophic. So having that as a mindset is technically a good thing. But the problem is, how do you take everything you have, everything you've worked with, all the different touch points that might have different solutions and different systems, and try to migrate them to a single source? How do you make that single source talk to everything else? And that then you're suddenly into data platforms. You're crossing the marketing toolset threshold immediately, because you have identity management, you have access management, everything gets involved. So it kind of relies on us as marketing professionals to start adapting to a more data technical every day. And it also relies on the data people to try to communicate with us and try to speak the same language as marketing. So it's a multi-layered problem, both in data orchestration and in people. So it's a very, very interesting future. So I'm very interested to see what the other panelists say too.
And as we think about this unified customer profile, right, depending upon the industry we're working in or the business segment we're working in, a user profile can have 4 different versions of itself, or a customer profile. And I think the challenge is, without coming into why do we need a CDP? What are the use cases? Is it data centralization and activation? Or gated silos of data that are owned by other business stakeholders outside of the marketing organization, for example, that are preventing these personalized experiences at scale? Without these clear use cases, we don't really know, or we can't really come together and really have a clear view into what is the CDP that we're selecting going to solve for. So we pick the right CDP partner, or else you go into one of those motions where you're trying to boil the ocean because you're trying to do it all, or you're trying to bring all the stakeholders together once you're implementing it, right, with costly time, dollars, talent, and resources to actually bring it to life. Because no matter whether you're using the CDP as a single source of truth, I do think when we think about limited resources, it will help action for non-technical users, that more personalized engagement at scale. I think Harvey put in a note in the chat around AI applications, right? Having a centralized customer profile that is not only clearly understood, but can be actioned across the different go-to-market functions is really going to help AI and train AI to ensure that sentiment analysis is actually intentional and understood, but also motioned in the channels that matter most to that customer itself. So it'll help us optimize where we put those precious marketing and ad dollars, but it will also, it is something we have to continuously farm and harvest. It's not a one and done. It's a continuous practice to get that data where it needs to be and current.
A work in progress. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Pratish, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, sure. Just to add to what I completely agree with Alexandra. I think that, she had some really good points, I guess. Just to add a couple of things, and just to pinpoint the biggest challenge that I see is data quality. I think that's I've worked with many startups, as well as companies that have scaled up enough to have a decent sized database, and also worked with a company which has massive databases in millions, and I've seen that none of them have actually 100% quality, or even close to 100%, maybe 90+%, let's say consistent and accurate data. So this is, I think that's the main challenge. Anytime if you deal with this, with a CDP solution provider, like any of these, the sales team, that's the first thing they'll ask you is, what do you think about the quality of your database, especially your MDM? And most of the times I've seen that the biggest issue is quality. Even we've even taken solutions, we've even basically started exploring a tool, and as just to add to what Alexandra said, that not every tool is going to work the same way, and not every tool is going to have like the kind of thing that you're looking out for. So it's the most important thing is to actually be very sure of which tool can work with a few inconsistencies and a few inaccuracies in your database. So I think that's one of the main things. And second is the challenge of unification. I've also seen that profile unification, sometimes it's called ID stitching. This is also like consistently like a massive problem. Even though CDPs, they always say that, oh, we can offer you, our tools can sort of like stitch together your database very easily, and you can see a very singular way of of your customers. But once you actually start doing the implementation of these tools, I've personally noticed that stitching fails sometimes. Like sometimes it's impossible to stitch. So a lot of the the good quality data that you actually have, the gold mine that you might be sitting on, like the customers, they often they're unable to sort of like stitch the data together from different platforms. So which sort of like defeats the purpose of what CDPs are designed for, like to offer like a singular view. So but then this is something that this opens up room, I believe, for new technologies. I believe someone in the chat also mentioned about having AI play a role on in trading CDP held data. I think if anything AI could do is probably look at helping these companies, especially the ones who've sort of on the way of implementing these tools, to stitch the data correctly, to stitch the data properly, and to sort of like somehow find a way to sort of enrich the data. I oftentimes I have many discussions with data enrichment companies, like companies which offer data enrichment services, companies like which have like all kinds of data, about all kinds of industries and all kinds of companies and professionals across the globe. I feel they are at the biggest point of threat at this moment because of this whole AI technology emerging, and somehow it's just a matter of time. Like one of these companies are going to definitely come up with something that's going to help unify and stitch these data without having to rely on a third-party data enrichment tool. So this is these are like the top kind of challenges that I feel it's challenging with the challenges that we feel with centralizing the data in a single location. Thanks.
And Pratush, to that point, there's predictions that the amount of data that exists today will double by 2026. So in just 3 short years. And you think about generative AI and these other capabilities, it's going to create more noise and chatter. So how do we figure out what are the patterns? And AI and machine learning can be great tools for that pattern recognition and that prediction capability that comes with that. But we have to know who our customers are, identify those patterns today so that we have a baseline to then benchmark ourselves against across our channels, both owned and third party, so that we can figure out, okay, what is actually our customer doing and engaging in? What are their patterns, whether they're on mobile or connected devices, or behind a laptop, like so much of us are these days. And then what is the noise? Like what is real versus not real? And I think it matters so much now. I think data connectivity and cleansing and having that single source of truth, or our best attempt at getting there, is so imperative today, because we think it's noisy now. It's going to get even more amplified and disrupted as we continue forward.
And to add to that, we currently are, like, I think today they launched the first drafts of the new EU AI regulations, and we are now at the cusp of maybe having to deal with regulation before these tools have even been developed. And on the point of like AI trained models, in-house models that is meant to like evaluate and develop and essentially help us inside the company work, that's one thing. But how many of those trained sets is then released back into the wild, which is technically trained on data that is not allowed to market to? Does that breach anything? Is that a conflict of ethics? These are questions that are very, very, very hard to answer until we actually have a more CDP focused like business world.
And a clear understanding of how do we use and lean into the CDPs for consent management and for ensuring that we are being good stewards of the customer data. But as brands go to not only manage the consent, we have to create those value-driven touch points and value-driven engagement so we get those more and we're more intentional with what we do and how we do it. Because to your point, and I think the challenge is also, I remember when we were introducing AI to marketers for the first time in 2015 or so, and really talking about the applications of what AI means to customer experience. The challenge is it's still not fully understood, especially by those who are making the regulations and the guidelines. And when I think through the value of business leaders who understand data management best practices and all the different tech stacks and solutions that live out there, we need more people advising or consulting or actively participating in these conversations so that we continue to create great experiences that drive value in real-time, meaningful ways, but that we're also not putting up a wall to creativity and best-in-class CX experiences that are really data-powered. So it's a balance, but I think it'll be an exciting conversation and a very challenging one too.
We've just had a comment from Dr. Owen on LinkedIn Live, where we're broadcasting as well. He said, right tool application with accurate data would be useful as well. I'm not exactly sure what tool there, but I'm presuming that's CPD related. But yeah, I think you guys have kind of touched on that already. But data accuracy, Pratyush, you mentioned that a few times there. Is that something a tool can fix?
I don't know whether if there's is a single tool which can fix all the kinds of data for all the kinds of customers. But it's something that we can explore. We can work with these companies, like the data enrichment companies, and we can understand how much of it can be fixed by them. And we've been it feels like this whole thing feels like a very unique experience. All this while we were so much so dependent on third-party cookies and other things and other different platforms and different systems to help us sort of reach out to customers and to sort of bring people on our on our platforms, on our websites. But now I think companies which have a real idea of who their customers are, as Alexandra said, I think those companies are going to be at the most are going to be at an advantage, because if you know who you're looking out for, it's going to be slightly easier to sort of find them, and then you're going to be able to sort of enrich your your database, and the ones who's still exploring, who's still trying to understand who the right customer is, or who the next customer is going to be. I think they're still going to be dependent on Google, like paid searches and paid social platforms. But yeah, this is what I think. Like, there's no one system which can actually do this. But yes, it's a matter of something that you can explore. And I'm very positive and I'm very optimistic that there's something that's going to come up very soon, which is probably, and I'm already sort of researching on this a lot. There are companies which are actually working on technologies which are going to be powered by AI tools, which are going to help us enrich the database in a very organic way, in a very realistic way, without depending on any cookies. But CDP is going to play a very important role in that for sure. Like that's what I know from from the bits and pieces that I've collected from our research.
Yeah, and like Alexander said, with the huge jump in data that's coming, there's going to be the need for these tools, and AI is probably one of the few things that's going to be able to handle all that. But I've got another comment from Harvey here, which I've got two. I'm going to stitch them together. One is talking about stewardship. So Alexander, I think this is probably aimed at you. and he says, what are the limitations to what you want to do with the data? And I noticed earlier he was talking about security issues as well, GDPR and stuff. So perhaps there's this limitation in terms of security, in terms of having people's data and storing it in one place that AI control. I suppose, yeah, quite a lot to think about there. So I'll just leave that open to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when we look at consumers' appetite for thinking about the brands they love using AI to personalize an experience. They're actually, I think it's over like 60% of consumers, when asked, are actually really excited about what this could actually mean. I mean, could you imagine never seeing an ad that is completely irrelevant or targeted at you from left field, right? And it's so interesting, you know, being in the MarTech space and being a marketing practitioner as well. It's, you know, we see these 3-point shots that are often missed in market, and they're very expensive misses. When you think about how that miss is actually scaled across not just myself, but potentially hundreds, thousands, millions, potentially globally for global brands. But these dollars add up so much, and marketers, number one, you know, are tasked not only with managing that consent, understanding GDPR and CCPA and all these other regulatory global implications that are also evolving, whether it's by specific state or geo or country. It's so fundamental, but we have to not only make sure we are managing and collecting those opt-ins, we're ensuring that we are using them in real time. So if someone has opted out, we have tools and platforms that can action and pull that individual's profile out of a campaign, whether it's just about to get launched or it's in flight. So I think when we think about what does regulation mean and the economic impact of regulation, we have to have tools, whether we're looking at our CDP or we're looking at our data cloud to be the single source of truth, that can do these in real time and do them in intentional ways that help us build trust rather than break it.
Thank you. I'm aware that our MarTech Fairy has posted the next section in, so I think it's time for us to move on to that bit now. Measuring and providing the value of a CDP. Which metrics matter most? So, Håkon, coming back around to you.
All right. Well, from what I can see from the different companies I work with, the biggest draw point for CDPs is always to be able to actionably and communicate directly to the client or customer without feeling like you're stalking them. It's a very, very fine line. And not to mention that, you also have the possibility that you can stretch out, reach out an arm to people based on who they are, how they act, and how they behave. So how do you put a KPI on customer satisfaction properly? Like, we have tools and questionnaires that we can use. We have loyalty programs, of course. But how do you really evaluate the change to real time, for example? How do you evaluate like a real metric for that? And one of them is, of course, communication. Like, I think the most important player when companies migrate over to more real-time CDPs and more centralized CDPs is, how is the customer conversations going? How is customer service, or how is the key accounts communicating with their clients now? Has it changed? Is the sentiment changed? What are we picking up now that we couldn't pick up before? Like, new opportunities and sentiment is probably going to be the most valuable metrics moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Alexandra, do you agree, disagree? Got more to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with Håkon's perspective and thoughts. I think the sentiment analysis, engagement rates, are we personalizing in a meaningful way at scale? Are we putting our ad dollars to work that are not only attracting new customers, but keeping them with our brand after we've spent so much time and effort bringing them to our world and our ecosystem? And what is that total lifetime customer value, right? It's one thing to attract them, but brands have to, whether they're B2B, B2B to C, or D2C, right, need to ensure that customer loyalty and value is continually invested in, and we're paying attention and making data-driven decisions because we understand our ideal customer profile. We know what keeps them up at night. We know what their wishes and aspirations and dreams are, and we're really creating the opportunities to drive value and personal impact at the end of the day.
Thank you. Pratish, I know we lost you there for a minute. I think we've got you back now. So if you wanted to wade in on which metrics matter most.
Thank you. So, again, depending on the nature of business and the kind of goals the companies have, we look at the a particular metric. But in general, conversion rates, that's something that we got to look. I mean, most marketers have to sort of keep a constant eye on conversion rates every day, understand how things are converting, like what's driving the conversion. I think earlier what Alexandra mentioned about devices. I think going forward, I think that's going to be like a very critical factor to understand which devices are sort of driving the conversion rates. For most e-com businesses now, because this is what my speculation is. So conversion. Besides conversion rates, we have obviously we look at the standard stuff like CAC, CLV, making sure that the ratio doesn't sort of like it doesn't get disproportionate to the ideal ratio that we look for, which is 2:1. And I think the whole point of having a CDP is to actually focus on and driving the customer lifetime value. Like that's because the way it speeds up marketing decision making, and the way it sort of it helps marketers, not just marketers, even like sales professionals, the product managers, everyone to sort of make quick decisions on understanding where the customer focus is moving on. I think CLV is a massive focus for some of the businesses that I work with, and but overall, I feel return on ad spend is probably the most important metric for sure. Which is I think that's going to be because once you work with the senior leadership teams, the CEOs and the CFOs, their whole focus is on return on ad spend. And I think CDPs can actually deliver the return on ad spend values and the figures in a very accurate way, because and more than accurate, it's the nature of getting the ROAS, return on ad spend in a dynamic way, like in a real time on a real time basis. I think that's one of the favorite metrics I see that the senior leadership teams sort of look out for. Yeah, so these are like, I think, but besides them, I see that some of the e-com companies have started focusing on a few different things, like they besides just metrics, they are also looking at the kind of analysis that these tools are helping them perform, like different kind of cohort analysis, like which can give you some results which might not be like a particular metric. It could be like something that an indication which can help you make some decisions, make some business decisions, make some changes in your strategies. But something like a particular analysis that I could say which is a massive focus nowadays, like that I see with a lot of e-com companies, it's RFM. It's just recency, frequency, and monetary analysis. Like this is like the most important focus. And I think again, CDPs, especially like some of the tools that we were discussing, like we've discussed already previously about like some of the leaders, the one thing that they can do good, and where the real competition lies amongst these tools, is to deliver, a proper analysis on RFM. Like that's where the real dollar is. Like so, yeah.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that we now have a system that, okay, wishful thinking, technically, but we now have a system that can solve one of the biggest hurdles that's been in digital marketing for a long time, which is, where did they go after that ad? What did they do? Like being able to actually do a journey analysis on somebody without having them tracked every step of the way has always been a problem. And like you have marketing field that has suffered more than others. Like programmatic has always been kind of a black sheep when it comes to what did your visits do? They saw it, but that's it. So it's kind of more like the shift we had from traditional media over to digital media and trackable media. And now we're getting so many more tools and so many more touch points and so many more opportunities to do this, that what used to be like a pipe dream for a lot of companies within like both predictive and prescriptive analysis, which is an incredibly expensive thing to start doing, is now technically possible if this goes the right way.
Yeah, and I noticed we've got a question from Gemma, actually, that with all this talk of the CDPs, all this positive talk of the CDPs, she's asked, how do you pick the right CDP for your organization? Big question, considering, Alexandra, I think yesterday you said there's hundreds to choose from, right? So it's...
Yeah, I think it's nearly 200 globally to pick from. So where do you start? I think one, it's looking at what are the single sources of truth today and where do you need to integrate, and what is the interoperability of that data connectivity to create that unified customer profile at scale in compliance, right, with regional compliance requirements, as well as best-in-class enterprise practices. But it's really important to not only make these decisions in a silo, but to invite your other core stakeholders, invite your CTO or your chief product officers, invite your data science team, understand all the different use cases that every stakeholder needs to really be successful in the job that they are tasked to do, and be a steward of the business and the customer experience, and find a solution after you've done your homework, you've identified the use cases, you've prioritized those use cases, to find a CDP that not only is economically viable and scalable near and long term, right? Sometimes you don't need the Ferrari out of the gate if you're brand new to the CDP space. Start small or start in a nimble, agile form and fashion, but bring your stakeholders with you across the business. And if you don't know how to start or where to start knocking on doors, ask questions like, how are you using data? How are we actioning it today? What type of BI tools and systems, or marketing cloud tech, or advertising tech do we have partners like LiveRamp out there, or the Trade Desk that we're using for data enrichment and this scalable connectivity, and figure out, okay, what do we have today and what are we missing, and where are the silos, where are the walls that we need to break down, and who is responsible for either those unintentional or intentional walls that are often stood up in organizations, and how do we bring everyone to the table in the conversation to determine what does a strong CDP look like for us, not just 1 or 2 years, right? They're very expensive to implement, as in any new large scale tech that requires a lot of data management, right? And rigorous data management at that. But figure out what can sustain you for the next 3 to 5 years. Ripping and replacing tech is so painful and so expensive that it's really important to find someone that can not only be a good partner, but offers maybe that customer success and that support and those roundtable discussions and that helpful hand and the blueprints for success that we all look for when implementing tech, and also be able to learn how to read through a little bit of the hype, right? The best marketing and advertising partners can also ask what they're not good at. So ask that question, see how transparent and candid they are, and really truly understand where they went. And I think that'll help you break through a lot of the noise.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alessandra. I hope that answered your question, Gemma. That's great. I'm aware we're running out of time, guys, and I just want to touch on our last topic point, integrating your CDP into your MarTech to maximize your ROI. Now, Håkan, I know yesterday in rehearsal you spoke about sort of rigging down and squeezing the juice out of what you have. I wonder if that kind of applies to this section.
Yeah, at some levels it does. Like, one of the main things you often see is companies that has gotten bitten by the bug. They bought in on a CDP because they heard they needed one. And then you end up with multiple data sets. You end up with one data platform and one customer data platform. Which one is the real one? And then you literally have made an immense mountain of work for yourself, because now you have to try to decide how to orchestrate your data in reverse. So one of the most important things to think about, especially for CDPs, is what role will the CDP play? Like, what integrations does that CDP actually need to have? Does it speak to the systems we have that it needs to? If it's a CDP for specific use cases and specific business verticals, it might not need to talk to your ERP system. Do you then need to pay the extra premium for a system that talks to economy? Or can you leverage a system that maybe has less connectivity, but more applicability for your business?
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we've come to time for this week, guys. But I like to end usually on a little question. You kind of touched on it already there, but it's just I'll just go around each of you. It's just a 2-word answer. Invest in a new CDP now, or enhance your current setup. I mean, yeah, Håkon, you kind of touched on that there.
Well, I can condense it. Hybridize.
Hybridize. Okay, I didn't have that as an option, but that's a good one. There you go, guys. Alexandra?
I echo. I mean, it's about agility and scale. So figure out what's working and what's not working and plug the holes in the boat rather than trying to build a new ship.
Nice. Thanks. Pratish?
I would say invest in a CDP.
It's good. Broad range. Thank you, guys. That's lovely. Well, thank you all for joining us this week, and thank you to our guests as well. Join us again on Tuesday, the 2nd of April at 3 p.m. BST, when we'll be talking about leveraging your influencers to ensure high and visible ROI. Until then, have a great week, and goodbye for now.